So good morning. Welcome to the latest Science Surgery. This month, our guest presenter is Joe Lacey from Innova Solutions. They've been a member of the BSGA for many years, and he's going to talk to us about a topic that is incredibly important for sign makers, but rarely given a lot of airtime. We're going to be talking about fixings. Joe is going to give us a short presentation, and then you'll have a chance to ask some questions. I can see we're also joined by Craig Brown, as always, but also some other BSGA board members. I think Linda is here, and also Jeff Bufton. So without further ado, Joe, if you're ready, I'm going to spotlight you, because you've had enough looking at me, and I'll hand over to you.
Excellent. All right then. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you those for joining us live, and I appreciate, Jack, you're going to be sending this out, I think, on our YouTube channel.
Yep.
But yeah, just to kind of give a little bit of overview of Innova Solutions. I know many of you we may already deal with. We've been going in the signage industry now for well over 20 years, providing structural tapes and adhesives specialised for the signage industry. Although in recent years we have ventured out and now cover a lot more than just signage. We also supply a lot of photoluminescent products. I personally sit on the board for the PSPA, which is the Photoluminescent Safety Products Association, as well as obviously helping out with the technical side of the BSGA. That's more for sort of fire safety signage, and I hope to be invited back to maybe talk about that a little bit more on a different session. But yeah, obviously over that time, we've developed quite a range of different products. We've seen lots of different applications, lots of different concerns, worries, things that people have struggled with, and we've tried to move with the times on that and developed new products. Work with customers to find the best process for them. Often, you can get the same result by doing it 10 different ways. It's just what works for you. So today, what I wanted to talk about, as Jack very rightly introduced there, is surface preparation. It's a key thing, if you're going to be using tapes or adhesives, you need to be doing it regardless. It's most of the time, whenever I see failures, it's down to incorrect prep. Tapes and adhesives are absolutely great at what they do, but a line I always use is that it's only as strong as whatever it's bonding to. So if that's a layer of dust or grease or grime, it ain't going to stick very well, and you're probably going to have issues that appear further down the line. So we are going to be, like I say, unfortunately with our technical setup this morning, my audio's coming through my phone, but the cameras are going through the PC. So I'm going to try and sort of rig it so you can see my preparation as we're doing it. If I could just get that camera down there. Perfect. Move the audio out of the side. So this morning I just wanted to go through tape prep. So we always recommend abrading, cleaning and priming. Now this piece here, I've already bonded up this one. Can you see that there? Or is that a little bit out of sight? Better?
Yeah. See that?
So this piece I've already abraded, cleaned and primed. Now we start off by abrading, always, wherever possible. I appreciate sometimes aesthetically, it's not always possible to do so if you're bonding some maybe powder coat or something that's going to be, visual. But as a minimum, we recommend cleaning. So there we have abraded. Now, when I've abraded that, you go in different directions. That's to increase the surface area. It gives the tape or adhesive a lot more surface area to sort of soak onto. We our sales director always uses the analogy that it can be like a waxed car bonnet. If you take your car to the garage, you have it valeted, it's all nice, it's very shiny, it's very polished. Rain will just flow straight off it. If it's anything like my car and it's maybe been sat under a tree getting sap on it for a little while, that water will pool. And it's because of the surface area. There's a lot more surface area there where it's got that sort of rougher surface on. So once we've abraded it, you need to make sure you clean it. So we recommend cleaning it with our Nova Bond IPA, which is a 99.9% alcohol, so it flashes off really quick. I wouldn't recommend drinking it, regardless of what cocktail you might put it in. But if we just clean that down, again, using a lint-free wipe. And when we're cleaning it just off in one direction. Craig's favourite band, just so that we can obviously move any dirt off. Moving it round, all you're doing there is you're pushing that dirt, grime into the surface itself and back into all those sort of cracks. You can see there how much dirt's coming off just from a little bit of abrasion. If we're not cleaning it down, then obviously it's only going to be as strong as what it sticks to. And if that's a layer of dust or grime, it's not going to be the strongest bond. Once that IPA is flashed off, we want to make sure we're using a primer. We have our Innova Solutions Multi-Bond Surface Primer. Now, we are working on a slightly more sort of eco-friendly version of this product as well at the moment, so watch this space. But when we're priming it, we're making the surface a lot more receptive to adhesive. So it might not always be necessary to do if you're maybe bonding a liquid adhesive, because they sort of act through a chemical reaction. They'll etch into the surface a little bit more. So it's not always necessary to prime. But with tapes, I would always recommend doing where possible. If you're abrading, cleaning and priming, we've done quite a few tests on different substrates and different tapes. And generally, you can expect it to be about 60% more, better adhesion, stronger bond, which obviously, might take a little bit more time. I obviously hear a lot of resistance on how it's adding time and process and cost as a result. But if you're going to be getting the best out of your tapes, well, why would you not? It's going to counterbalance any sort of failures you might have down the line. Or I don't want to spend that little bit more time just prepping it. But then, of course, if the sign falls down on site, your any sort of cost savings has gone straight out the window. So I've got my piece that is abraded, cleaned, and now primed. So whilst we're waiting for the primer to flash off that piece there, which shouldn't be too long at all, in true Blue Peter style, the one I prepared earlier here, I shall get some tape bonded to. So the thing to remember about most tapes is they are pressure sensitive. So you do need to apply some pressure on there when bonding. So I'm just going to make sure I've got that in shot. So the tape I'm using this morning is our XS110 HTGP. So it's a general purpose tape. It's a fairly new product in our range, but it can also go through powder coat as well. Now we do quite a different range of tapes and adhesives, as I mentioned before, and this one can go through powder coat. So it's ideal for sort of channel bonding, if you want it to be sort of colour match. Flip that over before it sticks to my table. Trim the edges so it's nice and neat. And then apply uniform pressure across the tape, just pushing out any air bubbles in there. Of course, if you're trapping air bubbles, they can, over time, they can expand, they can form a weak point. So you just make sure you're using uniform pressure. Always recommend using a roller, which you can purchase from ourselves, of course, before applying. So again, nice and smooth on there. I've applied pressure. I've pushed all that adhesive down into all those grooves that we've made earlier, and hopefully now making a much stronger bond. Now, as I've been doing that, we can see that the other piece has flashed off. So we can remove the liner. Apply our second piece over the top. Now, I'm just doing a standard lap joint here. Obviously, like I say, it can be used for sort of channel bonding or plenty of different other applications. Again, putting down, applying firm pressure and rolling that on there as well. So now we've got a nice firm bond. Now you can get to about 60% adhesion straight away. Full cure within sort of 24 hours once that's sort of wetted out. But again, the important bits there are abrading, cleaning and priming, just to make the surface that little bit more receptive to get that extra strength out of the tape. But already you can see that that's not going to be budging anywhere. There we go. See me again now. As I said, I like to. Here's one I prepared earlier. So rather than trashing up this lovely office that we're in, I thought just to demonstrate the strength, I'd bond a piece up from earlier, and that we've kind of thrown around, bashed about, and you can see it there. I've just used plain aluminium. That's bent the metal over the tape. I know when I first introduced the tape, as a lot of people probably in the sign industry were, they sort of thought, double-sided tape, is that not something that you use on Blue Peter for making your rocket ship bottles? But technology's come a long way since there, and as you can see from there, the structural strength is really quite impressive. But with adhesives, very similar process. The only difference being, like I said before, that you might not always use a primer. All the primer's doing there is, coating that surface with solvent with a contact adhesive just to help boost that adhesion, which with the way that adhesives work, in that you mix 2 parts together, 2 parts of the tube like this, then a chemical reaction will create a lot of heat and it will etch into the surface. So whilst we do recommend still abrading it, just to give that extra surface area and making sure that we clean it so that none of that dust is getting trapped between the adhesive and the might be a locator or whatever it is that you're bonding, then yeah, you should be good to go. Any questions?
Good stuff. Thank you for that. So perfect timing as well. Lovely, beautifully done. Yeah. Do we have any? Please do fire away a question. Put your virtual hand up, or go on then, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Yeah. We do a lot of road sign work onto use channel and onto ACM. Okay. I'm a bit old school. I like to use a one rivet to go with my tape fixings. Okay. Is there I take it it's okay with ACM. Is there a life expectancy outdoors that you kind of recommend for a permanent sign that's 10, 12 years?
No. So what we always say with the sort of signs is generally, always check the data sheet. Some tapes are different. Generically speaking, there, you can, once that the tape is installed, it's probably going to last as long as your, aesthetically as long as the sign does. However, I'd always encourage regular maintenance. I know I've been on a previous sign surgery where I think Craig was talking about the importance of just checking, making sure that there aren't any failures there. It hasn't started to come away. But in terms of bonding ACM to channel, it's kind of what the tape's designed for, really. ACM I would abrade if possible, especially being on the back of the sign, with it being a bit more of a painted, polished surface. It can be a bit more low surface energy. We do have tapes that we've designed for bonding to low surface energy substrates like powder coat or ACM when you can't abrade it. But yeah, I'd have no problems with doing the HDGP onto for channel.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask you mentioned the contact adhesive. Obviously, it generates heat by the chemical reaction.
Yep.
Any issues with transfer to the surface of a panel? I'm thinking of ACM that Jeff's mentioned. Obviously, with the plastic in the middle reaction, sometimes you get that discoloration. Is there anything you can do to avoid that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's quite a common issue in the industry. We've actually designed a couple of different adhesives to bond using, when you're bonding, might be a snap fix or simple fix locators to the back of ACM. Obviously, it's heat, but also the shrinkage of the adhesive. When it cures, all adhesives will shrink a little bit as they kind of solvent. Now, it's that can cause you the read-through on the front. Now, whilst you might get away with using certain adhesives, we've designed our SignFix 44 to combat that. So it's low shrinkage and it's low exothermic. So it's not going to generate the same heat and shrink the same. So it won't be giving you, it won't give read through on the other side.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. I think Jeff's got his hand back up again.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, it's another ACM road sign question.
Okay.
We use wind loading software for posts for road signage generally, and obviously that spits out a requirement of, depending on how big the sign is. So in the tapes world, do you have any kind of guide or reference about how much tape or channel should you put on the back of a sign, given exterior, given certain wind loadings? Is there any kind of guide on? Because some people might just put up 2 channels on an 8x4 sheet, and some might overdo it with 10. So is there kind of a guide or a steer that you guys can sort of help best practice?
Yeah, so best practice is belt and braces is always full coverage, especially when you're doing things like bonding to glass. We always recommend, if that's not possible, certainly doing vertical strips. If you think about the forces that's going to be applying on the sign, generally, sort of gravity and the weight that's going to be pulling it down and off. So what you want to do is the vertical strips to combat that. Obviously, if you're doing just length strips, it's only as depth. The only resistance there is the width of your tape. Channel is obviously slightly different, like you say there. as it's designed slightly differently.
We had to go on horizontally as well, because obviously the posts are vertical.
Yeah, exactly. However, like I say, I'm more thinking of a larger sign bond into glass there. I was being a little bit generic, but to go back to your example, we'd always recommend giving the full coverage of the channel on the back, making sure you're braiding, making sure you're cleaning, making sure you're priming. We do test these tapes in laboratory conditions to see what sort of weight that they'd be able to hold. All the sort of pull test data is available on the data sheets. However, there's always these external factors. There's a big difference between putting a small sign up inside and putting it on the south-facing slope that's right on the coast. It's got salt spray. It's got really strong winds coming in. There's all sorts of different things. So we always try and avoid saying, right, for every 1 kilogram you need X amount of tape, because there's so many different external factors that can affect it, really. But if you're ever struggling and you need some guidance, give us a call. We don't just sell a product. We always pride ourselves on that, going that extra mile with customer service and making sure that you've got the right product for you. Like I mentioned at the start, there might be multiple products that can do it, but depending on some of those external factors can depend on which the best tape would be for the job.
Great, thank you.
Interesting. We have had some questions in ahead of the call, and that was kind of one of them, Jeff, about how much tape is the right amount of tape. Now, this might be a simplistic question from, I'm not a sign maker, but is there an issue can you have too much tape on there? Can you overdo it? Is there an impact there? You'd love people to overdo it.
Yeah, come on, overdo it. Use as much tape as possible. No, I know it kind of looks at, the sales guy, of course, is going to say use as much tape as possible, but it really is that, these things work off surface contact. The more surface contact it's got, the more surface area, the stronger that bond's going to be. The less likely you are to have a failure. If it's all been prepped correctly and you've used adequate tape, you shouldn't be having one. But obviously, there's always going to be that, what one in a 100-year storm that comes in and hits some debris into the sign or something. To give it the best possible chance, always go full coverage.
Okay. You mentioned their primer. Sorry, I'll come back to it because I'll talk as it sort of fits in with this. Do you always have to use primer, or is it sometimes just an extra time and expense?
Yeah, so this is kind of what I was saying before, in that, I know a lot of people see it as, it's an extra expense, or, it's extra time that I've got to do, it's another process. But when you abrade, clean and prime, you're increasing the strength of the bond on average by about 60% in the test that we've done. Why, if you can get something better out of your product by doing that, then why wouldn't you? It's, in the grand scheme of things, it's not adding much time on. It's a fairly quick process. Especially if you're a sign maker, you're doing this every day. But yeah, in order to get the best strength out of it, I'd absolutely recommend doing it.
Okay. And I was going to touch on that. You said about the priming. I'm thinking, case scenario, I'm out in the van. I've rocked up on site. I've got grubby hands. I've noticed you didn't use any latex gloves or to stop any transfer of oils from the hands. Is there any specific storage that people, if we've got a sign crew, a mobile sign crew, they should be storing the tapes in a certain condition? We've all been in the van where you open the back up and everything falls out, and there's, it's got rivets and screws stuck to the side of the tape. I'm exaggerating for effect here, by the way. It is worst case scenario. I want to tape something. I'm coming to repair something. What would be the great way to transfer and keeping it in a vehicle?
Okay, so good point. So we actually supply our tapes in what we call pizza boxes, which are these sort of things.
Yeah.
So again, you just lift those up, got your various tapes in, and sort of the liner in between, as well as a handy little guide, as well as a bit of a reference point for right and bonding, X to Y. What tape should I use? I've got that in there. But obviously, keeping it in the box keeps it as dust-free and dirt-free as possible. They are incredibly tacky tapes. I've been to places where people have used these tapes. They've put it on the side workbench on a hot summer's day when the adhesive is a little bit tackier, stickier, and then they've struggled to get it off because all the adhesive on the side of it is then stuck to the bench. So whenever you're putting it down, I'd always recommend putting down one of the liners just to stop that happening and getting in trouble with the boss. But yeah, in terms of temperature, it should be fine in the sort of the back of the van. Obviously, if you're getting into extremes of temperature, warmer temperatures can make it tackier, stickier to feel, as it were, which can sometimes be a good thing, but sometimes equally it can be quite a difficult thing. It can make it a little bit harder to handle. We generally recommend keeping them in sort of around 20 degrees relative humidity, but to get the best out of them and the longest shelf life. But again, all that information is available at the bottom of the data sheets.
What is a typical shelf life on the tapes?
Okay, so officially we would say 12 months for tapes. I'm aware of tapes being kept a lot longer than that and still being used. But what you can find, and again, this is kind of where it gets a little bit more nuanced, in that depending on the adhesive type, depending on the tape, depending where it's stored, the humidity, things can start to break down over time, if not applied, because it's quite exposed just in roll form.
Okay. I noticed when you were abrading the aluminium, it kind of obviously leaves a little. You can see that you've done it. There might be where the aesthetics of the sign would. It's not possible to do that. So what would you do then?
Okay, so for that, depending on the substrate, generally when it's things like that, it's because we're bonding to powder coat or something like that, where, like you say, aesthetically you see in the front of it. I'd recommend using a low surface energy tape. We offer a couple of different grades, different thicknesses and colours, but they're a lot sort of higher initial tack, so they're designed for those low surface energy substrates, and it'll just give that little bit more grab and hopefully give you a little bit more peace of mind when you're bonding it as well.
Good stuff. I see you got that nice little wheelie thing. We could have done with that at the sign show.
Invite me along next time. I'll supply them. Don't you worry, Jack.
He did a great job putting the tape on the panel, Joe. You'd be proud of him.
Yeah, but what feels like an obvious question, but I mean, I guess there's more to it. Why is that pressure important to have an even, strong, firm pressure? What's it doing there?
So with the tapes, they're pressure sensitive. You need that surface contact in order for them to bond. Now, again, I've seen it before where people have kind of just sort of tickled the tape onto the surface and then peeled it straight off. It's not sticking. Reapply it, put it down, firm pressure on there. By using the roller, you're just making sure that you're getting all of the tape. And obviously, when you're pushing it down with your hands, you're only touching certain parts of it. Some people have rollers that they can put if they're fully coating the back of a panel before lasering, for example, they might pass it through a roller to make sure it's got that full contact on there. But yeah, just the roller is just an easier way of doing that, just to make sure you've got in all those nice little grooves that we've made when we've abraded it. It's making sure the adhesive gets in there.
Yeah, I presume you could use one of the plastic sort of, not plastic or squeegees, but you can just sort of run across with something else. It doesn't have to be a rolly thing, or is the rolly
I've
thing
always
the best
recommended using roller, so long as that you're getting firm, adequate pressure across the whole of the tape. Then, as I said before, there's multiple ways to get to the same destination. But I'd recommend using the roller.
So
okay. Jeff, your virtual hand is up.
Yeah, I'd also use a roller. Squeegees sometimes stretch the tape and you don't get a constant line. It gets a little bit wiggly, so I think rollers are more controlled. I've got two questions. One is obviously off the back of a comment you just made. Lasers, are they all laserable friendly? So if you're doing, if you're cutting acrylics and you've got an acrylic tape, then you can stick that on there. You have a range for that.
Yeah. So we've got a range that people do use for lasering. It depends on where it's going. Again, some tapes are better than others. Some of the LSE tapes can be quite dense, so they're very difficult to laser. But we do quite a range on that you can put through a laser. A lot of it is down to the liner. So what you'll find is a lot of filmic tapes will like shrink and wrinkle a little bit when you obviously get in the heat of the laser, whereas a lot of the paper ones, you might get a little bit of burning around the edges depending on the laser, but we'll cut through it a lot easier. But yeah, if you've got something in mind, give me a call and we can talk you through the options.
Yeah, a lot of our centres are using lasers mainly for acrylics, so I appreciate it's not VHBs and the aluminium like you showcased earlier on, but again, it's just there's a whole range of tapes that you can and can't laser, so it's just knowing you've got a range that people can dip into if required.
Yeah, so if it's something like acrylic and it's going, you're doing say door numbers or door signs, something fairly fairly lightweight inside. Again, maybe it's a Foamex or something like that. You could use our 80A, which is sort of an internal grade foam tape, which we sell a lot of that for people who are lasering it. Again, we cut, we produce these tapes in house, so we can cut down to whatever size that you need. We've got a 12-edge spooler for the plastic extrusion industry, so we can do rolls that are 2,500 meters. Not that many people in the sign trade need that, but again,
bigger volume guys.
But we can cut to any width. So if you had a specific request, for the lasering, a lot of people will do 300 mil wide, so they can coat the back of a panel. But if you had a different dimension you needed, we can do that as well. Provided it's a stock product for us, we're not going to charge any extra for the full log or something like that. We've got the material and we can just cut it down to order. The longest you'll wait is 10 days, but we always try and improve on that.
Okay, and we've got some of our guys are using laser cut acrylics to put on alley trays. So again, there's going to be a whole world of different expansion rates with acrylic and aluminium. So again, you've got a range of tapes that will manage those different expansion rates.
Yeah, absolutely. As well, you've kind of touched on a good point there. Tapes are, due to the viscoelastic nature, they can move a lot better with differential substrates. But what we find is built-up letters are obviously a big thing, where you've got your acrylic face, your metal return, and maybe if I'm invited back, I can do another demo on what I'd recommend for that. But again, we've got adhesives that we can recommend for those where you need a strong bond, there's not a lot of surface area, but you need that little bit of flexibility in there just so that it can move with the differential expansion and contraction.
Great stuff. And one last one, we referenced LSEs quite a lot for low surface energies. Is there a Dine pen guide reference on what constitutes LSE? Because there's obviously a whole grade of sort of borderline what's LSE, depending on the different types of paints, maybe different types of plastics. Certain stainless steels are considered LSE, but they all kind of have either like a Dine value, and sometimes you have like a Dine pen, which you can kind of figure out what the surface energy is of the material. Is that something you kind of have on your spec sheets as well?
It isn't currently. It's something we can absolutely look into. I didn't realise that sort of technology really was out there for sign makers. But yeah, generally when we say LSE, we envision powder coat, your polished surfaces, and like you say, sort of some acrylics and things like that, where you've got that really low surface energy, very smooth surface. But if in doubt, give us a call.
Paint is a nightmare. Painted walls, so internal acrylics. Obviously, the paint industry's changed, evolved hugely. There's lots of waxes and oils and resins now in paint. So again, sticking acrylic letters onto a painted wall is sticking vinyl on a painted wall is a permanent nightmare for the sign world. So again, it's the same kind of issue for sticking anything onto a wall. It's just be aware of the surface energy and obviously making sure that doesn't fall off.
The other thing as well, just to bear in mind there, with a lot of painted walls, depending where the sign's going, it's only going to be as strong as what it sticks to. If it's going to a painted wall that's been painted for the last 20 years and maybe it's starting to bubble and peel, it might come off there and probably take the tape with it, the paint with it. But on the flip side of that, you've got new builds where they might have just painted the wall, 3 days before the sign's supposed to go up. Paint, like plaster, will still solvent for quite a while afterwards. So it's just something to bear in mind as well. And obviously, those solvents might attack the adhesive over time. It's one of those. It should be obvious, but sometimes you don't always kind of think of, oh yeah, that paint is dry, it should be good to go. But that's why you can walk into a room 2 weeks after you've painted it and say, it still smells of fresh paint.
Still smell it, yeah, absolutely. I think the guide we have at the moment is the cheapest, thinnest emulsion you can possibly use. It's probably is the less offensive stuff. So not a great rule of thumb, but it seems to work for the industry at the moment. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question? Last chance to throw at Joe.
Well, the only comment that it relates a little bit to the failures that Jeff just mentioned. I had a conversation yesterday with somebody who had tape that failed on built-up letters onto a window, internal window on a shopping centre, and it transpires it was actually the solar film that was actually failing, not the tape. They hadn't realised that it had solar film on the glass, so that in effect that started to delaminate. But it couldn't work out whether there was a chemical reaction from the tape, obviously grabbing, that was then causing it to fall. It was just but transpired the tape, the window film had been there a long time. But it was just, again, sign maker had been around a long time, hadn't ever come across it before. So we could all fall into those little mistakes. So nothing wrong with the tape, just the surface hadn't been checked before it was applied.
See the importance of surface preparation. With bonding to glass as well, we do have a slightly different glass primer that I'd recommend. It's not a lot of people realise that glass is actually quite porous and it can trap impurities in there. So there's a whole other process guide for that. Again, you can't abrade it. Make sure it's clean. Gently heat it just to expel any moisture that might be trapped in there. Use your glass primer and the silane-based one that will just seal that glass off then, so that nothing's leaching out. But another thing to look out for as well is self-cleaning glass. We're seeing that a lot more in the industry. It's again mainly on newer shopping centres. It's designed really so that you're not having to clean your windows as often. No dirt can stick to it. Which, if no dirt can stick to it, it makes sticking to it with tape really hard as well. So if you ever come across that, do let me know.
That does beg another question, doesn't it? There's somewhere like glass in some places where you'd have a signage up, but then you'd want to put something else up. How easy is it to get that adhesive off the surface so that it's ready for another lot, if you like?
So do you mean like when you're changing signs over, perhaps?
Yeah, if you're changing it. Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to removing tapes, obviously I get asked a lot, oh, I need a tape that's really strong. It's going to hold in place for the next 5 years. It's going to stand up to chemicals, wind, rain, whatever might come of it. But then I need it to come away just snapping my fingers like that. But unfortunately, it doesn't exist. In order for it to have that strong bond, it needs to be a permanent bond. So when it comes to taking them off, it can be difficult, but it's still doable. We recommend the best way to do it is to get a cheese wire down the back of the sign. That way you cut in the back of through the tape. You can then remove the letter safely, which is obviously your big weight that you don't want falling down. And then some good bit of elbow grease. You can heat the rest of the tape just to soften the adhesive a little bit. You can use the IPA cleaner that I've just used there, as well as we have another sort of adhesive remover, which is designed for kind of that last bit of residue. But yeah, a lot of elbow grease, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that kind of makes sense. Okay. I think, well, that's great. I think you've done a great job of presenting that. I've certainly found it interesting. If there's no other final questions, do you have anything else you wanted to sort of finish on, Joe?
No.
How people could get hold of you and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of our sales team are available on LinkedIn. We try and regularly post there. We've got a girl called Amy who's really good at sort of doing product spotlights, and we're all starting to post a little bit more. Give us a call at the office, or again, just drop us an email. I'll drop my contact details in the chat afterwards as well if anyone wants to contact me. Personally, I do a lot of the sort of external and technical role at Innova, so I'm more than happy to come out and work with you guys on the shop floor. Again, like I said, there's lots of different products out there. There's lots of different processes. A lot of the time, it's just finding the right one for you. We don't charge any extra for me coming out just to see the guys and make sure they think it works for you, because you need to be happy with the product at the end of the day, and happy using it. So yeah, more than happy to arrange that as well.
Great job, Joe. Thank you very much for your time. And yes, we will have you back with the next one, I'm sure.
Thank you, Gavin.
The next session, next science surgery, will be on the 21st of May. You can see that and all our other events coming up on the BSGA events calendar, which is big and proud on the website. But thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Cheers. I'm gonna. Okay, I'll put your details obviously on the post when we put it out there, but everyone's gone now, Joe, so don't worry. Good job. I thought that's really interesting. Shame not to have more. I think I was going to say, Joe, I'll put your details and stuff on the social media posts so people can get you. I do think actually we should definitely work to get this on as a live stream, because then it can be on and people can sort of interact as it happens. This is what keeps me awake at night, Craig. It's terrible.
I just can't figure out why we couldn't see anyone. We couldn't, just very odd.
That has not happened before, is it? There must be some must have been some button clicked somewhere. Yeah, that's not spotlight on Joe. It must be here. Yeah.
Well, we can see Joe just kind of
Joining on my phone.
Yeah. Okay.
There we go. Rejoining on my phone, so you can hear me as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I was just saying about if we can work out how to live stream this, I think that would be either on YouTube or LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn would be better because it's just there then, isn't it? People can.
Yeah, certainly.
If we
No,
can.
as I said, it's just frustrating. I think you know when you can see people, you can see reactions, and then ask questions with people. When the facial expressions give a lot away, don't they? If that makes sense.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They could have. I re-enabled their video, but then nobody wanted to click it. So even Jeff, who's like, it's like a male model.
Yeah. Well, Linda came on and then off again as well. You're right. So maybe just felt, well,
Yeah.
we can't see anybody else.
Yeah, you don't want to be the only one, I suppose. Some people.
Yeah.
No. But no, thanks for doing that, Joe. As I said, I think, as I said, it seems to go pretty smoothly. And Jack, nice with Jeff throwing a few questions in as well, because obviously he's the one who gets the technical questions from his group. So.
Apologies for the technical issues at the start as well. I mean, I've been trying to join you since about 10 to 11. I thought I've sort of set up from home rather than the office because we're in the process of moving at the moment, so I don't have my normal setup. But hopefully it didn't distract too much.
No, as I said,
it's fine.
It's just frustrating when it's been working perfectly, and for whatever reason, I've had issues with Teams the last couple of meetings, but that's been to do with the processor speed of this laptop. But that shouldn't be an issue. Do you think? Because I had to join through the web browser. Do you think that's an issue?
Yeah, I had to do that as well. I was trying to join it through Teams, and then it wouldn't let it do the app, and then I've joined it on the web browser, which just seems to have been very slow.
On the basis that I thought Teams would be the simplest, on the basis that it's not even that simple, I might push to do this on Riverside next time, which is same thing. You have to go through a link, but it just gives you so much more flexibility on how we present, and then we can live stream directly to LinkedIn through that. So I think we'll bite the bullet and do that next time.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
That'd be good.
Alrighty.
And in all seriousness as well, I'm happy to help out. If you are doing a bit of a visual demonstration at another show, I know obviously we've got the one in September coming up. If more than happy to help doing that, if needs be.
Good. Yeah. Are you? Will Innova be exhibiting at that show?
We're talking about we probably will miss it this year, just because of kind of timings with everything. We've got a new marketing person starting with us finally on the 6th of May. I think they're going to be focused on other projects, and we're kind of one of those companies. If we can't give it our all, we're not going to.
Yeah.
We won't do it, sort of thing. So I'll certainly be there in person, regardless, even if we're not exhibiting.
But that's a good shout, isn't it? Because if we are doing a sign surgery live, then actually having some live demos would be pretty helpful. We don't want to upset the organisers, but I don't see that being a problem.
Get thrown out by the organisers, that will go down.
Sorry, why would we upset the organisers with a live demo? Or
they get very twitchy when we do. Because obviously we host the Explains Lounge when you get people who come in who aren't at the show. So sometimes that would get restricted to who we can actually have, because they say, oh, you're bypassing paying them to exhibit. So
understood. If maybe the workaround is that I'm there representing BSGA.
There's
exactly.
ways around it. So
You'll kind of, if everything's going well, everyone will be happy. If they've struggled to fill the show, they might be a bit tetchy. But they're not. They're pretty good. They're better than. It's fine. We'll sort that. Good. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody.
Perfect.
I will go and do a bit of editing now, and
thank you very much.
We'll get that done for next week.
Hopefully, you got my good
side.
Have a
good one. They're all good, Joe. Especially the bit done and you're